Hello world, and welcome to my channel, GuildWeb. So, I wasn't planning on activating this channel and recording any videos yet, but a significant piece of news has emerged in the gaming space, and I felt like I had to say something, throw it out into the void. I'm a big fan of collective action for good, and I think this is an opportunity where there's a chance that if enough people push back, perhaps we can change the path we're on and the direction things go from here. So if you're watching this video and are interested in the topic, I'd like to encourage you to make your own video talking about the subject, your opinion on what the pros and cons of it are, and most importantly to the industry, how you will react to the news with your wallet as a consumer. It's our money that these companies need to survive, so with that, we're the ones with all the power. It's just a matter of realising this as a collective and acting with this considered. And then eventually, if we can stick with it, we might find ourselves in a situation that is built more with the consumer in mind. So I've beaten around the bush for long enough now, and thank you for bearing with me. But the news I wish to discuss here is PlayStation announcing the cease of physical game production in January 2028. Following the news of GTA 6's physical copy not containing a disc, this came as not much of a surprise to me and many others, but it was a shock at how soon this announcement was. I thought we still had a good few years before we got to this point. So, how did we get here? On the 3rd of December 1994, Sony released the PlayStation in Japan, and with it, the first 8 PlayStation games. Each game would come in a hard-shell plastic case with artwork illustrating the atmosphere the game wishes to portray, and a manual that would give information on the gameplay, controls and lore of its world. Some games even included additional items like stickers, all of this on top of the physical disc used to play the game. Over time, some of these elements of the game would be removed or changed, like it's rare these days to get an instructions manual with your game, or sometimes you will get a map of the in-game overworld that can be used as a reference while you play. But for a long time, one thing stayed the same. When you bought a game, you got a disc. It's estimated that over the course of the next few decades and 5 generations of console, Sony will sell over 3 billion physical PlayStation games. With this, Sony PlayStation is the console series that has sold the most physical games ever, with Xbox taking second place with approximately 800 million. Alongside this, over the years, another way to purchase games became available, and that is digital. Slowly through the years, completely digital products in gaming became more and more prevalent. Mobile phone games like Snake and Metal Gear from the 2G era of phone games, through to smartphone games like Bloons Tower Defense and Doodle Jump, didn't see physical media, broadly speaking, as the devices themselves had no disc or cartridge reading hardware, with one exception that comes to mind, which is the Nokia N-Gage, and I'm sure there'll be a few more. While not in line with conventional full-priced boxed games at the time, these very well could qualify as the start of digital games as products in my eyes. At the turn of the millennia, there was a wave of web-based games which could be played directly through your internet browser, and they were usually paid for by the adverts on the web page, covering the cost of the game and the server hosting fees. These generally did not get physical releases, but some did go on to release retail games down the line in the tune of sequels. The first that comes to mind is the Trial series that started as a browser game I played on the Miniclip website back at school. And since then it has seen sequels released as digital arcade games and even physical releases across all major platforms. Around the same time, massively multiplayer online games had been starting to show up. At the time, internet speeds were too slow to download a major release video game, and a disc purchase would be required to install the game and activate your account. However, once installed, an internet connection would be required to play and update the game, and typically the game must be fully updated and connected to the internet to play. I'm going off topic a little bit, but I'm too close to an interesting point to not make it. Once the first update patch is sent to the servers, and this is then downloaded, and this data overwrites or adds to part of the game disk's installation, are you playing the same game? Are you still playing the physical release? The answer may seem obvious now, with all the context and understanding we have now about digital games, but back then I don't think it was so obvious. Digital games were still in their infancy. This is the ship of Theseus of physical games. I'm not a philosophy expert at all, but I do have an interest in it. The ship of Theseus is a concept that questions whether if a boat is the same boat once it's had each of its parts swapped and replaced for a different but equivalent part. And if that is a different boat, when did it stop being the original boat? And when did it start being the boat it is now? Or some would call this the Sugar Babes theory. In 2010, there were no longer any original Sugar Babes members in the Sugar Babes. So, at that time, were they still the Sugar Babes? And if not, at what point did they stop being the Sugar Babes? Back to games, it was not so obvious to the general person, or considered as much back then, but much like the ship, even if one file or board is changed, the product is no longer the same, even if sometimes it makes no practical difference. When the content from the disc is changed or added to, are you still playing a physical game? If not, when did it stop being a physical game? On top of all of this, the next significant addition to the discussion was just around the corner. DLCs. Downloadable content that adds features, areas, options or more, often charged for, but sometimes provided in free updates. You could buy a game physically, but then buy additional digital content for it if you have enjoyed your time playing it. The game itself typically could be bought in physical form or digital, but due to its nature, DLC would be exclusively digital edition. Or would it? Some games did offer physical discs for DLCs. An example I played was Fallout New Vegas Ultimate Edition. This was released after all DLCs had come out, and therefore a second disc could be added, which included all DLCs ready to install with no internet required. Because of its design, this meant these DLCs could be shared to others by lending the physical disc, a very consumer-friendly approach to the additional game content product. DLC in general, like the notorious Oblivion horse armor, started to erode the idea of owning a complete game on disc. Now, it was often that a game wasn't complete until you connected to a server to download additional content. The game's content would only be partially served when you purchased the game, and the other sections of a release would be chopped up and sold for extra. In the worst cases, these extras would be sold on release. Some companies have gotten so confident with their strategy that they aren't even hiding it anymore. Indie continued this trend of downloadable digital games, and it became more and more prevalent as time went on. These were small games made by smaller companies that don't have the funds or don't want to risk the cost of producing discs that might not sell. So these games tended to be digital-only releases, at least on launch. I see this as the Xbox arcade game era of releases. Some games like Brink and Cyberpunk 2077 released with terrible performance issues at launch. This made playing the game without connecting to a server to update it a real struggle. Updates and patches have been released since, and nowadays the developer intends and would expect you to play the updated version, not the initial release. This puts game reviews in a tricky place, especially when watching months or years down the line. Many games release broken, and consumers must wait for them to be fixed before getting the intended experience. The idea of what a game is on release is eroded further. Alternatively, when Final Fantasy I originally released in Japan, it was shipped with a game-breaking bug, and instructions were added into the box of every copy, detailing how to avoid encountering this bug that could prevent completion of the game. Just an interesting bit of information I found while researching this video. And speaking of instruction manuals, over the past 20 years these have become less and less commonplace in physical releases, and maps and other bits even rarer. It's another erosion to what you receive when you buy a game. And then we have Game Pass and its equivalents, a catalogue of games you gain temporary access to through subscription, inspired by the business model of entertainment streaming services like Netflix. This began to erode how necessary it is to own games. If you use Game Pass, you don't physically own all the games you play anyway, So what's the harm in buying a digital game if you really want to play something today? All these small things add up together and compound to create a culture of apathy towards physical media. More live service games also began popping up, inspired by the MMO model, which were the original live service games. Games of other genres started this always online movement, when each time you'd load up the game, updates will have changed things and even added additional content. This gives more reasons for you to spend time in their game, in their ecosystem, where all your money spent goes to them. Certain games like gachas are particularly predatory, but that's moving into a whole other subject, and I think I've been drifting around enough as it is. Maybe another time. Nintendo Switch 2 key cards are one of the latest moves away from true physical games. These are cartridge cards that hold only a license that gives permission for the console to download and play the digital version of the game. Now this does have its advantages over digital games. Currently, all digital game providers that I know of do not allow the sale of digital games once linked to your account, but these key cards can be swapped and sold just like a physical game. This is because the digital game is not bound to your account, but to the cartridge. Essentially, the whole point of these cards is to cut costs. As games get larger, these cartridges get more and more expensive as large capacity cartridges are needed. So instead of eating the cost, or putting the cost to the consumer, Nintendo have decided to decrease the quality of the product we receive. While the quality of the product may appear the same to some, as you can still play the game in its whole just as before, the physical game aspect has been eroded even more. If the digital store servers are ever switched offline, or you have no internet connection, you wouldn't be able to play that game upon taking it home from the shop. Now with new PlayStation games from 2028 not having a physical release at all, the connection between disc and game that was so concrete at the initial release of PlayStation has been severed. The symbiotic relationship between disc and drive. I'm now going to take a brief detour to talk about CDs, another form of physical media. These days they're mainly used for audio files, albums and compilations. The global peak of CD production was approximately 2.5 billion units per year in 2000. Then in the year 2020 that dropped to 200 million, less than 10% of 2000. And now in 2026 it's projected to be as low as 140 million, which is about 5% of the year 2000. However, production continues and is profitable, and there has been no erosion to the physical music album form. On top of that, even if production were to stop, you can still rip your own CDs on a computer for personal use if you own the digital album and want it physical. We'll now compare these numbers with PlayStation games through the years. The year 2000 saw 150 million physical games sold. In 2020 it was 115 million, which is 75% of 2000. And now in 2026 we have projected 60 million units sold. That's 35% of the year 2000. As you can see, the decrease in physical games demand is not as significant as the decrease in CDs. This comparison isn't perfect, but I want to talk about a significant advantage physical games have over CDs, an advantage that could protect demand. This is the fact that if you were to buy a CD, you're buying that to use in a CD player or a computer with a disk drive. There are many other devices you could listen to music on, many which do not have CD drives. The CD and the device you are listening to it on are not necessarily made by the same company. If production for one would stop or reduce unexpectedly, this would then have an impact on the other's demand, and therefore on the other manufacturer's profitability. They're fairly reliant on each other as products. The two products and companies that produce them have almost a symbiotic relationship. On the other hand, if you're buying a physical PlayStation game, you're buying it to play on a PlayStation console. Sony, who produce the discs and consoles, have full design authority on the console's design. The discs have been made to only run on a PlayStation, and the console is designed to only play PlayStation games. The symbiotic relationship between the two products is there, but both products are under the control of the same company, Sony. It is a closed loop, and as long as the PlayStation console is designed with a disk drive, physical media can be used to play the games, and there will be a demand for it. In November 2020, Sony released the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, the first Sony home console that had no disc drive. It instead had to rely directly on digital game purchases and the PS Plus game library subscription. A disc drive was available for additional purchase, but for those strapped for cash, what would you rather buy, a new game or a disc drive? This was a fatal blow for physical games. Now, this decrease in ownership of consoles with a disc drive leads to a decrease in the demand of physical games, which in turn over time decreases the need for a disc drive. It's a negative spiral we've been pushed into by the manufacturer Sony, and Microsoft has been making the same moves with Xbox. And now we get to where we are now. New games being announced as digital only. But at this point, we're not talking about Snake on your Nokia 3100, not Doodle Jump on your iPhone, and not even indie games like Faster Than Light. All great games in their own right, but not what you'd consider a full budget home console game. Now we have the big hitters, AAA games that will be released with no physical version. Rockstar with GTA 6 may well be setting the trend for the final death of physical games. So over the years, digital has been becoming more and more popular, and physical gaming has been experiencing a death by 1,000 cuts. But is this just an innocent trend, or has this been a coordinated effort to take ownership away from the consumer? So why? Control. These companies are not your friend. They are not doing this to give you a better product or service. This is ultimately a strategy to increase profitability and to take more of the slice of pie that is the gaming industry. If the only store to buy PlayStation games is the PlayStation Store, they have full freedom to charge what they want. There will be no other way to buy a PlayStation game, so the price they set is the price everyone will have to pay. This also means they can increase the fees charged to developers and publishers to have their games for sale on the store. If developers want their game available to PlayStation players, they'll have to pay the fees, no matter how much they cost. Digital only eliminates the second-hand market as we know it now. This is something major companies in the gaming industry have wanted for years. Sure, they could come up with a way for you to sell the digital licenses tied to your account, but there's nothing to suggest that would happen. Digital games have been available for the past 3 generations of PlayStation, and it hasn't been done yet. There is no financial incentive for them to do it, so unless their hand is forced, it's very unlikely. I expect Sony sees things as though every second-hand PlayStation game purchased is a sale that they miss out on, so eliminating the market is just a big plus for this profit-focused company. It is anti-consumer, it reduces choice, and I don't like it one bit. The implications. On top of those major reasons behind PlayStation doing this, there are additional implications to this digital takeover and annexing of physical that will affect us as gamers and consumers. Some of the effects we are already seeing, and some of them will come with time. The day one versions of many games are no longer accessible anymore. Games like Overwatch, Fallout 76, and pretty much any MMO out there, due to a cruel combination of mandatory updates and online requirements, even for single-player content. Now with the shift to digital stores being the only way to access games, we could be in a situation where this is the case for all games. With the current configuration of the PlayStation Store, when you download a game, you download the latest version, with all updates and patches applied. Digital-only games are server-reliant, just as I said with Nintendo game cards earlier. And now that physical seems to be going away, modern releases will not be purchasable without the internet and the servers being kept online. Once the servers are inevitably shut down, those files on your storage are all you have left. If they corrupt or you run out of space, that could be it. One of the worst cases for this is The Crew, a driving game by Ubisoft that has been shut down completely. The single player side of the game, the multiplayer side of the game, day one version and the most recent patch, physical or digital. This game cannot be played whatsoever through any legitimate means used to originally play the game, all due to online reliance for all aspects of the game, and the servers were switched off. Even physical was hit here, so it's not completely safe from this erasure, but this can happen to digital with less steps than physical. Online reliance for single-player games is another big issue, and I've kind of conflated the two a bit in this video, but I'd recommend watching someone else more informed than I explain this specific situation in more depth, because it sets a very scary precedent on how things may be in the future. We may very well own nothing and have our choices taken away from us. These are more extreme examples, and sometimes it is unavoidable due to being caused by the design of the game, like with MMOs. But DigiCreep has been acting subtly in the background too. Online connection became more and more important to games, eventually not just MMOs. Almost all games have updates, and almost all games have day one patches to fix issues. And that is the developers swapping out a plank or two before you even board the ship. I hope that what I've described here paints the image that over the course of the past 2 decades or so, the concept of what a video game is in one's mind has been eroded. Back in the day, a physical element for a game had to be involved in some aspect, whether it was a cartridge, a disc, a dedicated unit, or an arcade machine. And I don't think the electrons producing the ones and zeros of a digital game are enough to count as a physical element. Today, a game feels more intangible than it ever has been, and sadly we continue further down this path. The line between a physical and digital game gets thinner and thinner, and physical games become digital before our very eyes. It's funny to think, but much like physical losing the manual, map, box, disc, etc., eventually we could end up in a place where the physical collector's edition for some games lose all that's seen as unnecessary chaff from their product, and that would include the physical disc itself too. Though most collector's editions are just a glorified vehicle to sell merchandise anyway, rather than the game itself. I'd now like to look back to the ship of Theseus analogy that I made earlier. With day one updates and mandatory online connection, it begs the question, are any of the modern physical games we purchased and played for the past few generations actually what we took home from the shop? Or was that box we took home more the ghost of a physical game that the industry wishes we left in the past? The physical demand is still there. The numbers that Sony have used to demonstrate the reduced demand of physical games do not appreciate the fact that plenty of games are offered as digital games only, and physical games released far later after the majority of purchases for a game have been made, like with indies. Also, PlayStation somewhat took away choice from many consumers. The more casual-leaning gamer, or the parent buying for their child, are less likely to think of the long-term implications of resale, loaning, or server reliance of games. Their focus would be on keeping costs as affordable as possible at the time, likely locking themselves into the PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, especially with the PS Plus game library subscription being such an attractive and affordable service. Though even with that, the quality of the service has been eroding too. On a positive note, since the news of new PlayStation games not having physical copies from 2028 and beyond, demand for the PS5 disk drive has increased. Now, this may seem like a knee-jerk reaction, but it's almost like you don't know what you got until it's gone, or at least until it's got its foot out the door. I hope this popularity and interest in the disk drive continues, and I'm very happy to see it. Despite society trends and possibly many intentional choices by companies, there are still big positives to physical games. Positives such as physical games can be sold when you no longer need them, and equally you can buy second-hand copies of games for a cheaper price. You can lend them to friends and family. The games aren't as server-reliant, meaning the risk of not having access to them through external factors is reduced. The process of flicking through one's physical library and rediscovering old favourites can be therapeutic, and it doesn't feel the same when scrolling through your library on a digital store. And finally, physical games sometimes come with additional physical media, which can feel more immersive and significant. I used to love reading through the manual of a game while sat in the back of a car, being driven home from the shop, absorbing all I can about a world before I'm able to jump into it. Guild Wars in particular stands out for me for having fantastic manuals, or manuscripts as they called them. These provided plenty of information for you to make an informed decision on what profession you should play, to learn about the world, its continents and gods, and to work out the controls and features of the game. It's something that I'm very nostalgic for. So with all of this, what can we do about it? There's a few things we can do to try and turn this ship around. Companies have been making plays for decades at this point to put us in this position, so it's going to take persistent effort with the small things we can do. We can be far more selective with our purchases and go through our gaming back catalogue instead of buying every new release that catches our eye. We can contact the government and support activism that pushes for more consumer rights and protection. Video games are one of the most important forms of media now, especially for my generation and younger, so it's important the government take this seriously. Video games are art at the end of the day, and art should be protected and preserved for generations to come. Governments generally aren't quick enough with legislation to keep up to speed with technology-related products. Public traded companies and investors only seem to care about the next quarter, their return on investment, and trying to make as much profit as possible, despite the outcome on the industry, society, and consumers' feelings. The government should be protecting the consumer when companies take things to the extreme, and when we can't protect ourselves. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, there are alternate means of acquiring games, and I think these methods will become more and more popular if companies keep pushing their agenda. Lastly, and this may sound like giving in, but Game Pass does look like a more attractive option down the line. Once it's all digital only games that you're playing on Game Pass, AAA as well as indie, you don't own the games anyway. So personally, I'd rather just subscribe when I want to play something, but be selective with when I choose to subscribe, and the rest of the time focus on my pre-existing collection of games and the very rare digital game purchase. And I know that the world has changed, and that it may very well be that if I was growing up now, when in the car, being driven home from the shop with my new copy of a game, even if there was a beautifully detailed instruction manual in the case, there's a chance I'd just be sat there on my phone to kill time until I can play, rather than reading it. But I like to think that bit by bit, we can move back to a time less dominated by screens. But I'm pushing up against a completely different topic there, perhaps something I'll speak about another time on the channel. And perhaps it doesn't even matter to some that physical games aren't played anymore, or that we need the internet to play some single-player games, or that physical media is dying. But that's for you to decide how important it is to you, and then act accordingly. I have chosen to have an old man yells at cloud moment because of it. Thank you for listening. As I said at the start, I've been planning on making a YouTube channel for a while now, but I didn't feel quite ready. I don't think I'll have anything else out soon, but eventually I'd like to make some very casual content on games and culture. It probably won't be as scripted as this video, but I had a lot of particular points I wanted to make. But the sort of things you might expect from this channel are a gaming journal or diary where I talk about what games I'm playing at the moment, sharing stories of various gaming memories I have, content on specific games, and what they do well and why I like them so much, and maybe a couple top 10 lists thrown in with varying degrees of seriousness, all presented in a chill out and easygoing way. Essentially, I'd like to make the sort of videos I enjoy watching. Thanks again for listening, and thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time on Guild Web.